Today we're going to learn how to composite the driving car front plate that we shot. If we open up the assets, you'll see that we've got some cloud footage, a moving black back plate of our background, and what we shot. First thing we want to do though is do some media management. So we want to call our master folder Advanced Single Camera Production Green Screen, and we're going to drop our assets into that. We are then going to open up After Effects, and we are going to save that inside that comp, and we'll call that the same thing. Next thing that we want to do is import our files, so I'm going to double click over here with the project selected. Go to our desktop, and I'm going to just import the whole folder. Okay. Next, we're going to take the front plate footage and we're going to drop it into the comp. And if we hit Command K, you'll see that it made the settings exactly the settings of the video, which is 1080p 2997. Okay, let's take a quick look at footage. We see that there's a little bit of wobble and a wiggle in our dolly move, and so the first thing we'll want to do is fix that. What we're going to do is open up the tracker, and we want to stabilize motion, and then you'll see that we've got this little tracking point right here, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that we can move it. And what we're going to do is we're going to head over to this little spot right here that has a lot of high contrast. And so what we want to do is we want to set that tracking pixel right there. Smaller. We're going to, so this outside box, we're telling it to track everything that's in this box, and then we're telling this one to track everything as well inside this smaller box. Next thing we're going to do is go to Edit Target, and we're going to put that information right into that same layer. We're going to pick our options. We want it to be luminance because we've got a bright and a very high contrast area that we're tracking on. Tracker 1 is fine, built-in is fine. We want to make sure we're at the beginning of our comp, and then we'll hit the playhead and it'll start tracking forward. So that took a minute. But once we get through that, we'll hit apply, OK, and then what you'll notice is that we created a whole bunch of keyframes right here, and if we see any bumps later on, all we need to do is to go to that particular keyframe and then readjust that. Let's make this bigger. We just need to pick that keyframe and then readjust the tracking point a little bit to make that match. But let's go ahead and take a look at the whole thing. And see what we got. Alright, that's a much better move. So obviously we are going off of our composition, so we'll just hit, with this layer selected, we'll hit S for scale, and then we'll just scale it up until we have covered all of our business. So we've got there, There's a nice steady move. Okay, so the track is working great. Next thing we want to do is just some basic color correction on this footage before we start compositing. So we'll go to color correction, we'll go down to lumetri color, and we'll drop it on our layer. And we need to look at our scopes, and let's go ahead and we'll open up all the RGB scopes to begin with. We're going to need to nudge it a little bit to make this happen, and then I'm going to close scopes that I don't want. Vector scope, I don't want a histogram, and I don't want the waveform RGB. So then basically we've got the RGB parade, and to get good white balance, these three shapes need to look about the same. And so let's start by setting our black level, and so we want to have these guys touching at 0. Then we want to set our white level. Now we want to adjust our shadows. And this is, I'm just looking at the picture now just to see the kind of contrast that we want. Let's take a look at the highlights. And we'll go ahead and lift them all the way up. We'll monkey with the contrast a little bit, and then let's play with the exposure. Alright, it looks like we need a little more blue in our world. So we'll go to color temperature, and we'll adjust that so that these two shapes look about the same. Let's go into tint, which is green and magenta. And that even though those match, I'm too green here, so I'm just going to bump it up right about there. And we'll call that a good basic color correction. Next thing we want to do is pull a key on this. So we'll go to keying, we'll go to key light, and either drag it to that layer or drag it right on top of the comp. And we'll see that the key light is right there. We're going to hit the screen color paintbrush, and we are going to pick our background, and it does a pretty good job right away. Let's go ahead and turn our view to screen matte, and basically what we want to do is make our blacks black and our whites white. Let's see if I can make the blacks blacker. Okay, so that should pull a pretty good key. Let's go back to final result. Oh, actually, let's drop in the background. So we'll go back to our project folder, and I'm going to pull our comp out of there, and we'll drop the driving footage behind it. We see that that looks pretty good. So the next thing that we want to do is get rid of the foam core that's in our corners, and we'll create some masks to do that. I've got my Roto Bezier on here, so I'm going to click that off before I get started. I'm going to click that top layer, make sure our pen tool is selected, and then I'm going to click and drag to give me some handles to pull on, and then I'm going to make that mask subtract. And at this point, I'm going to keyframe the mask path. We want to do the same thing over here. I think I see a little bit of our C-stand right here. So I'm going to make that a little tighter. And I'm going to make that subtract mask, and we're also going to keyframe that. So let's go ahead and move forward. And I'm going to hold down the command button, grab some points, and reveal our car again. And let's go back to 1 second. We'll do the same thing right there. Let's go to 3 seconds. Make our adjustment. Go to 4 seconds. Adjust again. Same thing at 5 seconds. Six seconds. Okay, now let's go back and do the other mask. Coming forward. That's where the mask will start to change. Let's go to 3 seconds. I'm going to hold down the command button and pick these 2 points and just pull it back. Go to 4 seconds. Make our adjustment. 5 seconds. 6 seconds. 8 seconds. And let's look what happens at 7. Okay, so that's clear. So now we'll just take a look at the half seconds just to make sure that our masks are doing what they want to do. Okay. This mask, hold down the command key. Oh, actually, we'll just grab this point. And this mask, I'm going to nudge it just a little bit. I'm going to hold down command, pick our 2 points. Just nudge it over a little bit. Okay, so let's watch that. We'll pre-render that and make sure that we got some wobbling going on over here, so I'm just going to make those let's watch that again. Next thing we'll want to do is mask out this foam core that's here, and we've got a little bit of our C-stand there as well. Foam core, so we're going to select our car footage, the foreground plate, and make sure that Roto Bezier is unchecked. We're going to take the pen tool and we're going to make a mask that's near our car, and we are going to make it a subtract mask, and I'm going to animate the path, so we've got a keyframe there. We'll do the same thing to this side. We'll make another mask. We're going to make that subtract. And we are going to keyframe its path. So let's go ahead and move to 15 seconds in. And I'm going to hold down the I'm going to hold down the command key and pick these 2 points, and I'm just going to kind of walk that back a little bit. So and we will do the same to this mask. Go to 1 second. Adjust our mask so it's just not quite touching the black. We'll do this every 15 frames just to get a good start. I'm going to move this keyframe here so that it starts moving in that 15-second progression. Just going to hit the keyframes there to keep our progression going. Alright, so that cleans that up. Let's take a look at it. Next thing that I want to do is I want to drop some Lumetri on our background. And I just want to desaturate it a little bit right here so it looks a little bit more like our foreground plate. Okay. Next thing I want to do is create a new adjustment layer. And an adjustment layer will affect all the layers that are below it. And so we're going to drop a Lumetri on that. We're going to call this CC for color correction. So if you just hit the return button, you can name it whatever you want, and then you hit return again, and then the name will stay. What we want to do is go to the creative tool, and we'll go to looks, and I want to start with SL Gold Heat. I want to pull back on its intensity. Something like that. Let's go into the basic color correction. I want to lift the shadows a little bit. Okay, we'll live with that for a minute. In the background, let's go to blurs, and let's take camera blur and drop it on that, and we'll see that it's set at 5 pixels right now, and that does a good job of just kind of like subtly changing that. But we also want our lens blur to repeat edge pixels, because you'll see that we see the alpha layer right here at the edge. So if we repeat edge pixels, then we'll have like a nice sharp edge right there. So let's take a look at what we've got so far. Alright, we're getting somewhere. Next thing that I want to do is add some reflection in our windshield. And so basically we're going to want to create a new composition, and I want it to be 1920 by 540, which is half our width. And if we go to project, we'll see it says comp 1, and we want to call that windshield. And in our assets, we're going to drag cloud in here. And what I want to do is go to alignment, and I want to align it to the top. And I'm going to hit P for position at the beginning, and then at the end of our comp, we're going to align it to the bottom. And we've got some trees kind of sticking in here, so I'm going to back that down a little bit, about there. And now what we have here is a very subtle movement of clouds that should give us a sense of motion of driving along that windshield. So let's go ahead and go back to our front plate. And I'm going to actually hit return, and I'm going to instead of front plate, we're going to call it green screen your name. Okay, and we are going to drop the windshield comp right about there. I'm going to hit scale. I'm going to break the scale, and we're going to make it a little fatter. And as you'll see, we see that the clouds are moving up. I'm going to hit T for opacity, and we're going to lower this opacity to about 20% so that we can see through it. Maybe we can make it a little darker. Just enough so that we can see it. And we are going to then draw a mask that covers the inside of our windshield. So with this layer selected, we'll take the pen tool. I'm holding down the space bar so I can make some adjustments, and we're going to make if you hold down the option button, it gives us some handles that we can turn. I'm going to click the end of that. Let's walk it up to this highlight. It'll make it a little easier to track. All right. And so that will give us a complete mask. Next thing I want to do is I want to move this anchor point to the bottoms because we're going to need to resize this over the length of this comp. And so we've got this anchor point tool that I'm going to select, and what that does is it allows us to move the anchor point without moving the image. And with the anchor point down here, when I scale, things will start scaling up from this point, and hopefully it'll speed up our tracking process. Windshield chosen, I'm going to hit the letter F, and that's going to open up the mask feather of this mask. And let's start with 15 pixels of feather to see if that'll match. And now I'm going to close it and open it, and I'm going to animate the mask path. So the next thing we want to do is keyframe our scale. So with windshield selected, I'm going to hit S, and we're going to just create an initial keyframe. And if we hit U, we will see that we've got that keyframe open. Let's go down to 115, and we'll see that our mask path needs to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to hit scale. We're going to lock this. We're going to make it a little bit bigger. Go back here. Return that to 100%. Okay, let's go to 215. And we'll need to adjust our scale and our position. So back to our original keyframe, I'm going to hit P, and we'll keyframe that position. Go back to 215. I'm going to hit U so it shows both of them, and then we're just going to pull that down. Set that at 3. Let's pull it down. And we're going to need to scale it up a little bit to the sides. Do it at 315. Scale it up. And it's going to need to go a little to the right. Do it at 4. Scale it up first. Pull that right. 415. That looks pretty good, so I'm just going to hit the 2 keyframes. At 5, we need to scale up. Pull it right just a little bit. 515. Scale up. Need to pull it down. And scale it a little more. Six. A little more scale. A little to the right. And a little bit down. $6.15. Scale up. And we'll pull it down. $7. We'll scale it up a little more. And drop it down. Just scale that and drop it just a hair. 8 seconds. We're getting near the end of our move. I want to, I'm going to hit T. We're going to pull up the opacity all the way and see how that, now how it tracks. Let's go back to 0. Oops. Okay, so we just have one big, that's the problem right there. So we've got that is fine. I'm going to hit U. And that's, so that's where we want that to be. And we need to pull this one down. Delete that keyframe. So these keyframes are a problem right here. So we'll redo those. We'll just pull it up a little bit. Pull it up a little bit. This one we want to pull down a little bit. Let's take a look at that. Okay, that should be close enough. We're going to set this windshield mode to screen. If you don't see screen on here, if you come in this box and right click columns, you'll see this modes box that needs to be checked. And then we will pull down the opacity again so we can see our guy and a little bit of clouds. Let's see what that looks like. Let's make the opacity a little heavier. Okay. So now that we've got that on, I want to go back to our color correction and let's see if we can get away with just lowering the exposure overall a little bit. And let's lower the shadows. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we don't that this is the normal key light right here. So let's go ahead and keep lowering our shadows. And let's lower our highlights as well. Okay, I'm going to add another lumetri to this. Let's pull down the shadows here. Let's see what that looks like. So that's looking pretty good. Makes me want to know, who is this loner? Where is he going? Is he looking for redemption or revenge? So now we'll just render it. Pre-render. If you haven't already named it your name, you'll do that. You'll click here to tell it where you want it to go, and we can send that right into, and we'll call it like final. And then we'll go to our output, and it is going to pop up automatically to be animation codec, which we don't want because it's way too big. And we'll just go with Apple ProRes Lite. Render that and post it on canvas.